Namaskar and welcome to KUNDALICONSULT once again. Through my videos on YouTube, through my updates on Telegram channel, so far you have got to know a lot of aspects of astrology which affect our day-to-day life, various kind of dashas, about planets, their effects, so on and so forth. But then have you thought of where does this astrology come from, or is there any literature available which gives the origin of Vedic astrology? Now, in one of my earlier videos and also some of my Telegram posts, I'll refer to my YouTube video, which is titled as Mahadev Explains to Ma Parvati. If you have not seen that video, I suggest you go and see that video. So in that video, I had said that the Hindu trinity, that is from Brahma, Vishnu and Mahesh, from all three different lines of Vedic astrology come down. Of course, of that the most difficult is from Mahadev, which I have tried to explain in that video. On the other side, the most common is Briyat Parashar Hora Shastra or Parashari astrology. Now that comes from Brahma. If you start reading that Hora Shastra, Parashari Hora Shastra, it basically says by saying Brahma explained to Lord Narad, to sage Narad. Narad then explained to somebody, and then he is explaining to sage Parashar, and Matra is explaining to sage Parashar. So in both of these, there is no story attached to it. But actually, the astrology which comes down from Lord Vishnu, as always with Vishnu Avatar and Vishnu Leela, there's a story attached to it. And that story comes down finally as Bhrigu Samhita. Now there are a lot of sutras which come from that story also, but let's not go into that. But let's today talk about the only story which is available about how astrology came from one of the Trinity, Lord Vishnu, to human beings or to sages. So the story goes like this, that once the Saptarishis were doing some home and they wanted to give ahuti to the lords or the Trinity. So that time Narad came, and usually the way he is characterized, he asked, okay, whom will you give the first ahuti? And the Saptarishis had no answer to it. But the answer was obvious. Whoever is the most superior of them, he will get the first ahuti. So then the question arose, who in this Trinity is the most superior one, who deserves the first ahuti? Now to that there was no answer. So what Saptarishi did was, now if you read classics, sage Bhrigu or Bhrigu Maharishi is considered the most knowledgeable of all the rishis. In fact, if you read the original classics, sage Bhrigu is not a Saptarishi. He has been placed above Saptarishi. In fact, in Bhagavad Gita, when Lord Krishna is giving his own introduction, and he says, I am this in this, this in this. So he says, I am Surya in the Navagrahas. I am people amongst all the trees. So he says that I am Bhrigu among all the sages. So Lord Bhrigu or sage Bhrigu has clearly been put on a pedestal compared to the rest of the sages. So all the Saptarishis turned towards Bhrigu Maharaj, Bhrigu Rishi, and said, only you are capable of finding out who is the most superior of the all three. Now, Lord Brigu or Sage Brigu, if you read classics, apart from his huge knowledge or the biggest wisdom and knowledge which is attributed to him, he had certain amount of arrogance in him, because probably he knew that he is the most knowledgeable of all the rishis that were there. And he also had an eye on his foot, one of his foot, on the down face, which when you walk, it would fall in contact with the earth. So Sage Brigu then takes it among himself to determine who is the superior of the three. So he first goes to Lord Brahma, and he is waiting at the door, and Lord Brahma is busy with Ma Saraswati. He does not respond or does not see Bhrigu Rishi for a long time. So Bhrigu Rishi gets very angry, curses Brahma, and goes on. Then he goes to Mahadev's place. And there also Mahadev is busy with Ma Parvati and does not observe him for a long time. So there again, he kind of curses Mahadev and goes on and goes to Vishnu Lok. Now when he reaches Vishnu Lok, again he sees that Lord Vishnu is just staring at Ma Lakshmi and does not notice Bhrigu at his door for a long time. So Bhrigu then, by the two rejections that he had already had the anger grown in him. So with all the anger, when he sees that Vishnu also does not notice him, he kicks on Vishnu's chest. And that image you will see a lot in many of the classics portrayed. And many of you would probably hear this also, that Sage Bhrigu kicked on Lord Vishnu's chest. Lord Vishnu immediately then sees Bhrigu. He wakes up from his trance, so as to say, and instead of saying anything to Bhrigu, he takes Bhrigu's leg on his hands and he starts massaging them. And he says to Lord Bhrigu, Sage Bhrigu, I am very sorry I did not notice you, and your leg would have got hurt by hitting me on the chest. So I am very sorry for that. And he starts massaging his legs. Now, this is a very curious situation where you see, the Jagat Palanhar Lord Vishnu massaging Bhrigu's feet. And Ma Lakshmi sees this and she is very unhappy at this. And she says to Bhrigu that from today, I will not come to your house or any Brahmin's house. I will not stay in your house. And this is Lakshmi Ma's curse to Sage Bhrigu, that I will not be there with you, or I will not stay in your house. Now, when all this has happened, Bhrigu realizes the mistake. Then he starts crying that what a big mistake I have done. And then, his arrogance goes, and Vishnu then says it was all a part of a Leela, basically to get you out of your arrogance. And he also says to Bhrigu that only you had the courage or you had the ability to test the Trinity. Apart from you, nobody in the universe has the ability or the courage to test the Trinity. So that was the kind of stature of Lord Bhrigu. So anyway, when Lord Bhrigu goes back after all this, then Lakshmi Ma had cursed him that I will not stay with you. So slowly, Lord Bhrigu, because Lakshmi Ma has gone away, goes into extreme poverty. So he goes back to Lord Vishnu and says that Ma Lakshmi, because of whatever mistake I have done, is not staying with me, and therefore I am in extreme poverty. How do I make a living of myself in this circumstances? So then Lord Vishnu, on one side, gives him a boon that Lakshmi, because she has cursed you, she cannot obviously stay in that form. But she will be born as your daughter. So she will be born as your daughter, and if Lakshmi is born as your daughter, then obviously wealth has to come back to you. So it's not Lakshmi who is coming back, but his daughter is coming back, who is Lakshmi in avatar, and therefore you get your wealth back. And the way to getting that wealth is, Vishnu then told Bhrigu that I will tell you the method how to predict people's life and then accordingly give guidance to people to get out of their miseries. And this is the astrology. So that you can use to tell people about their future as well as guide them. And that's how Vishnu transferred that knowledge to Lord Sage Bhrigu, and it came down as the passing of a story, at least exists, of astrology coming to sages and then to human being and the classics which have been written. Now this part of astrology is called Bhrigu Samhita. A lot of you may have heard about it. So of the three astrology Vedic line, from my Lord Shiva comes the Kal Chakra, and there is one more, I'm forgetting the name right now, Vipak Samhita from Mahadev, which is very difficult to understand both of them. Then you have the Parashari Hora Shastra, which comes down from Lord Brahma, and here with a story, Bhrigu Samhita comes down as the third branch of astrology. So therefore, it's a very interesting story which is there in classic. It talks about greatness of Sage Bhrigu. It talks of a story of Sage Bhrigu and how astrology comes. It talks of how Lakshmi is born to Bhrigu Maharaj as a daughter, and later on Shukra Graha, who is the wealth, the originator of wealth in astrology, and that's why, because he is born to Sage Bhrigu, so he can, why wealth is associated with Shukra, because Lakshmi is his sister, and therefore the wealth has to come. So that is where it comes. And it also gives one thing, that since Vishnu gave this boon to Sage Bhrigu and explained him astrology and said you will earn your living by predicting people's future, it also becomes imperative that whoever astrologer makes some prediction for you or tells you some remedy. Now, whether that may work, whether that astrologer is genuine or farce, or whether he's faking, that's a different thing. That is his own karma. But your karma also determines that you always give a dakshina to an astrologer whenever he makes a prediction for you or gives a remedy. I hope you would have enjoyed the story, because always I tell about astrology and sutras, I thought I must give the only story which is available for the origin of one of the branches of Vedic astrology. Do subscribe to my channel if you have not done till now, and follow me on Telegram for my regular updates on astrology. Thank you. Namaskar.